Your books are they paint such a strong narrative as far as the drama. I mean, there must be a few people that you drew from your life.
Well, there are some composites.
Yeah. Okay.
But I try and be careful not to bring real people in, although in the Pink Pony there are 3 real people who gave me releases to put them in there.
So, Charlie, let's go to the map, and I'd like you to explain exactly where the book takes place.
All right. Well, it takes place, this is Traverse City right here. And this is where the courtroom scenes, they take place here and then up in Sutton's Bay. But it takes place in sort of this part of northwest lower Michigan. This is called the Little Finger. Sleeping Bear Dunes is here. Leland is here. The farm, the big cherry orchard is here. Her body is found here. So, and that's where the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore runs for 22 miles all along here. It's the last national park in the United States established. Just the premise of this story is there's a 400-acre cherry, this is all made up, but there's a 400-acre cherry orchard, been in the family for close to 100 years, right in this area. And the government wants it, right? And so they're fighting, and our hero, Burr Lafayette, has kept the government at bay for 7 years. He's delaying, he's doing everything he can. He's a brilliant, his personal life's a mess, but he's a brilliant lawyer. And so finally the woman who owns the farm with her 2 sisters, Helen Lockwood, has a power boat, which you see on the cover of Bare Bones when you see the cover. Anyway, she takes her boat out to South Manitou just because she likes to go out there in a boat. She takes it out there in the storm.
But it's a classic older
It's a classic, like 1956 40-foot Chris Craft. It's beautiful, beautiful boat.
Michigan made possibly?
Oh, yeah, it's probably made in Holland, Michigan. There was a big factory there. Anyway, so without giving away the story, she takes her boat out there. 2 days later, her boat's found drifting right out in here, but she's not aboard, and she's missing. A year later, a couple is out on South Manitou, and their Labrador Retriever comes back with a bone, and it turns out to be one of Helen's bones, and she's found buried in a shallow grave.
And then it's just off and running.
Yeah, then it goes from there.
Okay. Yeah. Why? Now, this character, by the way, he's in all of the books. He's a central character in each time. And frankly, I think for any author, that is probably one of the, to have a central character show up in a movie, a TV series, or a book, he's got to be pretty compelling. And he's not my kind of person that I would want to hang out with necessarily, but to me, I just couldn't stop. You're writing so visual, I couldn't stop watching him. Again, there's a strong drama of the murder in each one. It involves courtrooms. I have no interest in the legal system, but this is absolutely fascinating. And I get the impression that other lawyers would appreciate that element of your books because it's not dry. It's not just dry. It doesn't feel like you're sitting in a lecture, but there's some interesting points about the law that I never knew that are kind of interesting.
Well, I'm a recovering lawyer, so I still pay my bar dues, but I haven't practiced in a long time. But I have to make sure, I have to do 2 things. One of which needs to be interesting, right? Because if it's not interesting, nobody's going to read it.
Right.
And the second thing is it has to be accurate, because there's a lot of lawyers who read these books, and if I make a mistake, boy, do I hear about it.
Right.
So there's a lot of research involved in there, and in fact, in the book that just now came out was reviewed by the Michigan Lawyers Weekly.
Let's pull the book up. Let's get that book up here. This map's interesting, but it's not that interesting. There we go.
All right, that's obviously Bare Bones. That's not the one that was interviewed by, that's in the book, but these are the Sleeping Bear Dunes here, obviously.
Right.
I climbed them from the front, and I climbed them from the back. When you write a book like this, obviously you got an incredible amount of background. I mean, you must be traveling to these places and doing your research. Right. Yeah.
So, can I assume some of the characters are based on people that?
Yeah, you could assume that.
Okay, all right. And I've tried to do this with Charlie before. You cannot get him to talk about who these people are, which I...
No, but they're composites. But you would recognize some traits, probably, right, in certain people that maybe get blended with a couple other people.
All right, and if people go to these towns, when you travel to these places and you've read the books, I think you're going to probably see some of these stores, some of these restaurants.
Yeah, there's real places in there. The Bluebird in Leland is one of the most famous restaurants in Michigan, and there's a couple scenes in the Bluebird.
Okay.
That's also part of Michigan's wine country, and there's one of the characters in the book is a vintner.
Well,
so
you're a little hard.
I was a little tough on it. I was a little tough on it.
Okay, but what is so funny is when I read the book, and I don't want to give it away, but when I read the book, I literally called a friend of mine who is a vintner up there, and he's in the process of selling his whole business up there for some of the reasons that you cited. It's a tough business to be in. A lot of people are doing it.
Right.
I sometimes wonder if these Michigan vintners it's just a tax write-off like some people are in the horse industry, but it's fascinating. It is absolutely fascinating, some of the topics you bring up. Evidently you know something about wine.
Well, I probably drink too much of it, but that's right. When I started, I had a publisher. But right around the time I started, as you're probably aware, the publishing industry, like the record industry, just got turned upside down.
Right.
So small publishers just really couldn't stay in business, and my publisher said, look, love your books, I can't afford to market them. And so I bought the copyrights back. And then I rewrote The Pink Pony, actually, I don't know, 2 years ago. And I now self-publish them because I have total control over the marketing and everything else. And I actually make a lot more money doing it on my own because, Amazon sells. I mean, I love local bookstores. Bookstores are one of my favorite places to go. But Amazon sells 80% of the ebooks and half of the printed books.
Right.
So if you don't do something on Amazon,
you're not in the business.
You're not going to do it.
Okay, you're not in the business. And don't you find, though, your books, I'm guessing they kind of resonate because of Michigan history, and they are pure Michigan. They've got all the elements of an exciting story. But, like, for instance, I'm guessing fly fishermen from around the United States might start picking up your book, somebody interested in wine, because some of the side stories in the books, does that help to sell more books outside the Michigan area?
Trout Unlimited did a review of The Gray Drake.
All right, well, no interview could be complete unless we talked about the sex scenes. Most of your books are punctuated with, I think, a very tasteful sex scene. It's weird for me to even bring this up. How do you balance that? I mean, how do you... Because I think you do it very tastefully, and it's like, even though you're done reading, they don't last long, they still linger.
Right.
What is that balance?
Well, I have to really think that through and not make it too graphic, but and leave a lot to the imagination, but make it descriptive enough so that you sort of can feel like that's where you are.
Okay, so it creates a narrative, and then the reader takes it further, has enough to fill it in.
So I really do need to make it tasteful for that. I mean, I'd say they're R-rated. They're not, certainly not X, and maybe just a little over PG. But it's not a formula, but I try and make sure that Burr always has a love interest, and that's something
which makes sense because it's a big part of his character and who he is. Because I mean, there's times. His encounters with his love interest, I can see how that is affecting him in the courtroom.
Right.
And that is such a major part of our lives. So I think it's probably really important to have in there.
The books are available at bookstores and at Amazon. The Crooked Angel is just out now. I'm about halfway through the next book.
Wow.
Which is called Under the Ashes, which is about morel mushrooms in Michigan, which, are a huge thing. As
a writer, do you find that your main character, are there things happening like right now in this series, in your head, where you've kind of either you're excited about the direction he's headed, or are there also times where you're writing him into a corner?
Yeah, both. Well, he has he's a person like, like you are and like I am. And so there are things that we may do different, things that people wouldn't expect us to do, but they're sort of within a range, right? And it's really boring if anybody does the same thing all the time.
Right.
So he has to get in new predicaments and come up with new ideas. So anyway, Joe, the answer is sort of the sky's the limit with the stories, although they're not going to get too gruesome.
Right.
And the sky's the limit with all the ancillary characters. And I put a lot of time in and work on those characters. Usually I have a separate yellow pad that has a description of each character.
Right.
And sometimes they get changed. And I have to go back and redo it. Burr needs to have some of the same characteristics because he's a person.
Right. It's what drew us to the earlier books.
But he also has to grow and change in some way.
Okay, so that we can expect to see that in the future books.
Right, yeah.
You know, Charles Cutter, I really appreciate coming on the show. I mean, it's just really exciting to see somebody who had a life as a lawyer, you had a life as a businessman owning radio and TV stations, and you've left that all behind, and now you're just kind of cashing in on all these incredible experiences you've had as a sportsman, as a business person, as a lawyer. So I really appreciate coming on the show. Thank you.
But Joe, thanks. It's been great to be here.